This time it's 5 classic heavyweight trials bikes. Yes, the Trials Rider, once described as the magician of the motorcycle world, and it's difficult to argue, but the modern trials bike has more in common with a BMX than any road bike, but of course it was not always that way. And so here are 5 classic heavyweight trials bikes. The AAL Red Hunter. The AAL Red Hunter was originally the company's sporting single. The bike had been designed by Velpage as an overhead valve sporting model. But in 1932, Edward Turner effectively rebranded the bikes as the Red Hunter range, adding a touch of glamorous chrome. The machines were available in 250, 350 and 500cc forms, and were popular machines for use in a variety of off-road pursuits, including trials of course. In its initial form, the 500 made around 24 horsepower at 6,000 RPM, enough for top speed on the road of around 87 miles an hour, far less of course for a trials bike. And in road trim, it was certainly no lightweight, weighing in at around 420 pounds or 190 kilos, wet. But the AAL is of course most associated with Sammy Miller, a man who rode for AAL in both the TT and, importantly for this video, in trials events, winning the Scott Trial on 2 occasions in the early 60s, before eventually moving on to Bull Taco in 1964. But Miller's machine was of course extensively modified, weighing in at just 111 kilos and with 220mm of ground clearance. And all this was achieved by ditching the original frame and applying a completely new one made of Reynolds 531 tubing. And there was of course extensive drilling, not just to the frames and fittings, but also to the lay shafts and the gearbox too, which were then plugged with nylon. Add in lightweight alloy wheels and a lightweight hub from the AAL leader, and you've got a machine which was very potent even well into the 2-stroke era. The AGS Model 16 Trials. AGS's Model 16 MC was one of the earliest examples of a machine specifically designed for use in trials, and was catalogued as such. The MC made use of a 347cc single-cylinder 4-stroke engine, which made around 18 horsepower at 5,750 RPM. There was a 6.5 to 1 compression ratio, and a metal plate that could be removed to raise compression if you wanted to use the bike for scrambling. The bore and stroke was 69 by 93, and AMC claimed a wet weight of 319 pounds. Like Royal Enfield, AMC were early uptakers of swinging arm suspension, and this would give them an advantage, contrary to popular belief at the time, when riding over loose ground. In the early days, AMC's star rider was Hugh Vinnie, known as the King of Plonk, nothing to do with champagne. It was simply because of his ability to ride the AGS so slowly up any given slope that you could hear each combustion of the engine. Vinnie would win the 1947 Scottish 6-day trial at his very first attempt, and he would go on to repeat his achievement in 1948 and 1949 also, and would win yet again in 1953. By that time he'd been joined by Kentish farmer Gordon Jackson, who would pick up the gauntlet and carry on winning the Scottish 6-day trials in 56, 58, 60 and for the final time in 1961. Unlike the equivalent rotors, which used brazed lug frames, the trials model used an all-welded chassis, and so was consequently much lighter and considerably stronger too. Early frames, like so many, were rigid, but by 1955 the bike had moved to full swinging arm, with AMC's own dampers fitted. Although these would be changed to Girling units in 1957, the year the machine also underwent a major facelift, with ground clearance increased from 7 inches to 10 inches. But by this point the machine was at its zenith, with Jackson winning the British Experts Trial in 57 and the Victory Trial, held in Shropshire incidentally, in 1958. The Model 16 would continue to rack up wins into the early 60s, but by that point the financial problems that were affecting AMC would stall any further development of the machine. But AMC would struggle on for a couple of more years, before collapsing in the mid-60s, bringing to an end AGS MC production and of course its matchless G3L stablemate. The BSA Alloy Clipper. If, like me, you hail from the not-so-sunny climes of Great Britain, you won't be familiar with this machine name at all, because it's the name attached to what is essentially a trials version of the BSA Gold Star in the US market during the mid-50s. and was a machine intended for all sorts of off-road pursuits, from dirt track racing, scrambling or motocross for modern ears, and of course trials. Like so many early trials bikes, the first models used rigid rear ends, although this would later be replaced by a swinging arm frame. BSA had produced an earlier off-roader which used an iron head and barrel, but installing the all-aluminium alloy BSA Gold Star engine lightened the bike considerably and greatly increased performance. The engine used was the post-war B Series Gold Star motor. Early models ran a 71x88 bore and stroke, later models ran an 85x88 bore and stroke, for a capacity of 348 cc's, in its smaller form at least. In the period immediately after World War II, the firm's star rider was Bill Nichols. Nichols was a talented all-rounder, excellent in motocross, or scrambles as it was then, and trials as well. He came to BSA's attention after winning the Hode National Sporting Trial in 1946. BSA immediately offered him a job, and in 1947 he would win the Scott Trial for them. But Nicholson wasn't happy with the BSA frame, so one weekend he constructed his own frame, which incorporated a steeper head angle than standard and was much lighter. Naturally, BSA's management weren't too impressed that he'd built his own frame instead of using the works one, but when the victories started to roll in, they complained rather less. Nicholson was soon joined by Eddie Dow. He would campaign the BSA successfully in the International Six-Day Trial throughout the 1950s, and from 1953 onwards, Dow would campaign the BSA Gold Star at the Clubman's TT also. But when the Clubman's TT was axed, BSA lost interest in the Gold Star project, and into the 1960s, BSA's trials mounts would be based around the C15 and B40 unit construction engines. The Royal Enfield Bullet. First Royal Enfield Bullets were sporting singles originally entering service in the 1930s. Post-war bikes, however, represented a complete redesign of the bike, when the 30 Sloper was replaced by a bike with a vertical cylinder, with an aluminium head and swinging arm rear suspension. Indeed, Royal Enfield and their Bullet were the true pioneers of swinging arm rear suspension in the British market, and in the hands of their star rider Johnny Britton, it became the most successful heavyweight trials machine of all time. The 350 was a 346 cc's with a bore and stroke of 70x84, but in 53 the model was joined by a 499cc version with a bore and stroke of 70x90. In trials the Bullet was immediately successful, with two Bullet riders winning gold medals at the 1948 International Six-Day Trial, followed in 52 by Johnny Britton's win at the Scottish Six-Day Trial. But in 1953, even more impressively, he would win the International Six-Day Trial without losing a single point during the event. Famously, of course, the Indian Army was so impressed by the Royal Enfield Bullet that in 1949 they ordered them for use along the Indian-Pakistan border. This then would lead on to the 1955 establishment of a factory in Madras, modern Chennai, which would continue production of the Bullet at a rate of around 20,000 a year, right through into the 90s, the longest production run of any single model. The VELET MAC or Mac. VELET MAC, but we'll just call it the Mac just to keep things simple, was a 350cc single introduced in 1933 and was in effect an enlarged version of the earlier 250cc MOV with considerably better performance, around 75 miles an hour top speed. The Mac would be produced for the War Department in various forms during World War II, including the MDD and the MAF. Both these machines would form the basis of trial specials in the period immediately after World War II, when new machines were very scarce. Early post-war models would feature girder forks, but these would soon be replaced by the Doughty pneumatically damped forks, before the later adoption of hydraulically damped forks lifted directly from the LE model. In standard form, the bike was of 349cc with a bore and stroke of 68.5 by 96, although this would later be joined by the 500cc MSS model. VELET's engine is famously narrow, and while this did make for a somewhat awkward clutch arrangement, it makes the bike ideal for off-road use, and this not surprisingly led to the development of specialist trials machines, which like this model would make use of lightweight aluminium top ends, lifted for the more sporty models. But unfortunately VELET was a smaller company and never did develop a purpose-built trials machine, however they would build a small number of scramblers. although they can often be seen now as specials and P65 trials. Whatever bikes or collections of bikes would you like to see us do a future video on? Maybe get a bike we can use for a test drive. Either way, get in touch below. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.